Greetings! Welcome back to the Island of Patmos, a study of Revelation. Today we'll be discussing Part 5, The Darkness. All Bible verses are taken from the New King James Version, unless otherwise indicated. During the 9th plague of Egypt, complete darkness lasted for 3 days, but in 536 AD, much of the world went dark for a full 18 months, as a mysterious fog rolled over Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. The fog blocked the sun during the day, causing temperatures to drop, crops to fail, and people to die. It was, you might say, the literal Dark Age. This was a harsh reality for the millions of people who lived through that literally dark time, or as some historians have declared, the very worst year ever to be alive. For the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during the whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear, nor such as it is accustomed to shed, was the grim account according to Procopius, a prominent scholar who became the principal Byzantine historian of the 6th century. Procopius also wrote of disease and war resulting from the blocking of the sun's light. It was a drastic change that happened overnight. According to Cassiodorus, a Roman politician, we marvel to see no shadows of our bodies at noon. He also wrote that the sun had a bluish color, the moon had lost its luster, and the seasons seemed to be all jumbled up together. We have had a winter without storms, spring without mildness, summer without heat. The crops have been chilled by the north winds, and the rain is denied. Much of the rest of the world seems to have been impacted by the cloud as well, at least in the northern hemisphere. Less solar radiation reaching the earth resulted in lower temperatures and abnormal weather patterns. The results for humans included lower food production, famine, as well as increased social and political upheaval. A Syrian scribe described the change as, the sun began to be darkened by day and the moon by night, while ocean was tumultuous with spray. Gaelic Irish records describe a failure of bread. In China there was famine and drought with many deaths, as well as reports of yellow dust that rained down like snow. In some parts of China the weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. At the same time, Korea faced massive storms and flooding. In Mesopotamia, unusually heavy snowfalls were noted. Scandinavia seems to have been particularly hard hit. Archaeological evidence indicates that almost 75% of villages in parts of Sweden were abandoned in these years, and areas of southern Norway showed a decrease in formal burials up to 90 to 95%, indicating that haste was taken in departure. This displacement may have been a catalyst for later raids by Vikings, seeking more fertile land in other parts of Europe and beyond. A Norse poem from that time reads, "The sun turns black, earth sinks in the sea, down from heaven stars are whirled." According to Norse morphology, Fimbulwinter was a warning sign that Ragnarok was coming. Fimbulwinter means the great winter, and was referring to an unusually cold and harsh winter. Here is their description of Fimbulwinter. Snow will drift from all directions. There will then be great frosts and keen winds. The sun will do no good. There will be 3 of these winters together and no summer between. Ragnarok is referring to the destruction of the world. The devastating Fimbulwinter has long been considered nothing but a myth, but this view has changed in recent years. Scientists are now seriously considering the possibility that Fimbulwinter was based on the dark days of 536. The severe weather may have impacted other historical trends as well. Among them is the migration of Mongolian tribes westward, the fall of the Persian Sassanid Empire, and the rise and rapid expansion of Islam. This period of cold and starvation caused economic stagnation in Europe, that intensified in 541 when the first Justinian plague broke out. The plague was named for the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, who, according to his court historian Procopius, contacted the disease and recovered in 542. The Justinian plague is the first known outbreak of bubonic plague in West Eurasian history and struck the Mediterranean world at a pivotal moment in its historical development, when the Emperor Justinian was trying to restore Roman imperial power. The Justinian plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, was transmitted by the flea-infested rats, which were carried on the grain ships and carts that were sent to Constantinople. In the 8th century, North Africa was the major source of grain for the empire. The grains were stored in warehouses, which provided perfect breeding grounds for the rats and fleas, which were responsible for the plague. The epidemic was first reported in 541 from the port of Pelusium in Egypt, and then spread across the Mediterranean in the ships that transported the grain. The first few cases appeared in Constantinople in the spring of 542. The disease soon took hold and raged for 4 months in Constantinople. The victims of the plague were described by Procopius as people suffering from delusion, high fever, and pus-filled swellings in different parts of the body. While some lapsed into comas, others died almost immediately, while the rest of the victims suffered for days before dying. Justinian ordered vast pits to be dug to dispose of the rotting corpses. When these overflowed, bodies were stuffed into the towers of the city walls, or they were loaded onto ships that were pushed out into the Sea of Marmara and set on fire. Constantinople came to a standstill. Food started to run out, and law and order broke down. At its height, perhaps as many as 10,000 people a day were dying. By the time the plague had run its course, nearly half the city's population was dead. The plague spread throughout Western Europe, where it became endemic with localized outbreaks occurring for the next 2 centuries. However, the worst was over by 590. It is impossible to be certain of the mortality rate during this outbreak. Estimates vary between 25 to 100 million deaths. About a third of Europe's population had been wiped out. Were these dark days recorded in the book of Revelation? Let's go to the 4th trumpet. Revelation chapter 8, verse 12. And the 4th angel sounded, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, and the 3rd part of the moon, and the 3rd part of the stars, so as the 3rd part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a 3rd part of it, and the night likewise. The darkness in 536 AD long remained a mystery, but recently scientists can shed new light on the subject due to tree ring and ice core analysis. Let's start with tree ring analysis, which began in the 1920s. Michael Bailey and his colleagues at Queen's University Belfast in the UK studied tree rings using oak preserved in Irish bogs, and put together a tree ring record stretching back several thousand years. In 1988, they reported that during the first millennium AD, the narrowest tree rings, indicating poor growing conditions and cold temperatures, occurred within a few years of 536. More tree ring data followed from other groups, and a pattern emerged. The narrow tree rings weren't just in European oaks. The study concluded that in 536 and the following 10 years, there showed a period of slow growth in Scandinavian pines, European oaks, and even several North American species, including bristlecone pine and foxtail. Similar patterns of ring size decrease are seen in trees in Mongolia and northern Siberia. Tree ring data suggest that this was the most severe cold spell across the northern hemisphere in the last 2 millennia. On to ice core analysis. Ice core analysis began in the 1960s. An ice core is a core sample that is typically removed from an ice sheet or a high mountain glacier. Since the ice forms from the incremental buildup of annual layers of snow, lower layers are older than upper layers, and an ice core contains ice formed over a range of years. The ice cores can be collected as deep as 2 miles long. The physical properties of the ice and of the material trapped in it can be used to reconstruct the climate over the age range of the core. The proportions of different oxygen and hydrogen isotopes provide information about ancient temperatures, and the air trapped in tiny bubbles can be analyzed to determine the level of atmospheric gases present, such as carbon dioxide. In 2018, polar ice cores were collected and analyzed from Greenland and Antarctica. Evidence of sulfate deposits were discovered in these ice cores from 533 to 536, which suggested a substantial and extensive atmospheric acidic dust veil caused from a volcanic eruption. The dark band in this ice core indicates a layer of volcanic ash. Besides this, Laura Hartman, a University of Maine graduate student, discovered 2 microscopic particles of volcanic glass captured in an ice core dating back to the spring of 536. Using X-rays to determine their chemical fingerprint, it was determined that they closely matched glass particles that had been found in lakes and peat bogs in Europe as well as in Greenland. These particular bits of glass resembled volcanic rocks spewed from an Icelandic volcano. It's possible that the Icelandic volcanic eruption in 536 emitted thick ash that spread across the northern hemisphere, pumping large quantities of sulfate into the atmosphere. The perfectly disastrous mix of winds and weather could have guided the plume across Europe and into Asia, causing the volcanic fog that rolled through. Other studies conducted recently have suggested that there could have been more than one volcano responsible for that time period's tragedies. Could 1 or 2 massive volcanic eruptions be enough to cause the darkness that occurred in 536? Not according to Dallas Abbott, a research scientist at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. She also studied Greenland ice cores dating from 533 to 540. Besides the sulfate deposits, she found extraterrestrial material. She discovered high levels of tin as well as nickel and iron oxide, indicating that this dust came from a comet. This material was deposited in the northern hemisphere during the spring. There are 2 meteor showers every year in the spring. These meteor showers are not the comet itself, but are the material from the comet that had previously been shed and left behind. The Earth then plows through this same material every spring. This points to either Comet Thatcher, which is the source of the Lyrid meteor shower in April, or Comet Halley, which causes 2 meteor showers, the Eta Aquariids in April or May, and the Orionids in late October. Halley's Comet zooms by Earth every 76 years or so. It appeared in the Earth's skies in 530 AD and was astonishingly bright at that time. Of the 2 brightest apparitions of Comet Halley, one of them was in 530, Abbott said. Comets are normally these dirty snowballs, but when they're breaking up or they're shedding lots of debris, then that outer layer of dark material goes away and the comet looks brighter. So when Halley's Comet zoomed by Earth in 530, it left behind a lot of material that the Earth now plows through every spring and fall. Abbott believes that a piece of Halley's Comet could have hit the Earth somewhere in the spring of 533 to 540, and if a chunk of Halley's Comet did in fact hit the Earth back in 536, where did it hit, and would we see evidence of an impact crater? Not if it hit the water. Dallas and her team also found in the ice cores samples of algae and plankton that are normally found in tropical ocean waters. An impact in the ocean could have transported these organisms far away, or possibly caused a tsunami that delivered them from the tropics to Greenland. So, if Halley's Comet was so bright back in 530 AD, did anyone see it? Shooting stars and meteor showers were recorded around 530 in China and the Mediterranean, which led one contemporary writer to comment, "Something mysterious and unusual seems to be coming on us from the stars." Halley's Comet swung around the sun on November 15, 530 AD. China had first seen it on August 29th as a broom star in the morning sky with a pure white tail. The comet vanished from their sight on September 23rd, then swung around the sun on November 15th, and then went back into orbit. Did the book of Revelation indicate what caused the darkness? Let's look at the third trumpet, Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 to 11. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. And it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. The third trumpet states that a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. By definition, a falling star is a meteor. A meteor is a meteoroid that enters the Earth's atmosphere and burns up, and a meteoroid originated from a comet, so Halley's Comet would fit this description. But what about the volcanic eruption? The Chinese may have heard its echo. The Nanshi, History of the Southern Dynasties, says that in February of 535 from the southwest, there twice was the sound of thunder. This could indicate Krakatoa in modern-day Indonesia as the prime volcanic culprit. Notice also how the visions that John sees are centered around Jerusalem and the Mediterranean areas. Since the volcanic eruption didn't seem to take place in these areas, John doesn't see this in his visions. The comet and the darkness, however, could be seen and felt around the Mediterranean. What about the water turning bitter? The power of meteors hitting the surface of the earth or the water can have devastating impacts on the Earth's hydrosphere. Mass amounts of evaporation and vaporization of the water will result in loss of total fresh and salt water around the planet. Tidal waves and tsunamis caused by the impact could easily flood the interior of continents, and water becomes contaminated due to the chemical processes between the minerals inside the meteor and the water, which leads to acid rain. When a meteorite enters the Earth's atmosphere, sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide are released into the atmosphere, which reacts with water or precipitation and creates acid rain. Acid rain has a pH between 4.2 to 4.4, which is considered acidic. Water which is acidic will taste sour or bitter. Wormwood, by the way, means bitterness or grief. Healthy lakes have a pH of 6.5 or higher. As acid rain raises the level of acidity, thus decreasing the pH level, fish tend to die off. Most fish species can't survive a water pH below 5. When the pH becomes 4, the lake is considered dead. Liming operations have been successful to restore rivers and lakes to their proper pH levels. The lime deposits will reduce the acidity by raising the pH levels of the water. This picture shows a helicopter dumping lime deposits into a lake in Gothenburg, Sweden. Now the effects of acid rain on humans. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide in the acid rain react in the atmosphere to form fine sulfate and nitrate particles that people can inhale into their lungs. Many scientific studies have shown a relationship between these particles and effects on health function, such as heart attacks for those with increased risk for heart disease, and effects on lung function, such as breathing difficulties for people with asthma, pneumonia, or chronic bronchitis. So was 536 AD the worst time ever to be alive? For the people living at that time, it certainly was. To many it would have felt like the world was coming to an end. However, Jesus told his disciples that these things would happen while on the Mount of Olives. Luke chapter 21, verses 9 to 11. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass first, but the end will not come immediately. Then he said to them, Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. Besides Halley's Comet, there were other apparitions in the sky as well. In the Gallery of Natural Phenomena, Part 6, The Dark Ages, strange sightings began in 313 AD and continued until 542 with the onset of the bubonic plague. I'll list just a few of these strange sightings, starting with Halley's Comet in 451 AD. On May 17, 451 AD, the Chinese saw Halley's Comet, which rounded the sun on July 4th. In 457 AD, a gigantic blazing thing appeared in the sky over Britain. On its beams hung a ball of fire like a dragon, with two beams streaming from its mouth and ending in fire. On May 28, 458 AD, Hydatius recorded a solar eclipse at Chaves, Portugal, when the sun appeared reduced in the light of his orb to the figure of the moon 4 to 5 days. The eclipse was total in the North Sea at noon. On March 1, 462 AD in Portugal, a lunar eclipse turned the full moon to blood. On January 14, 484 AD, there was a total solar eclipse beginning in Greece at sunrise. Around 523 AD, sky terrors returned to Britain. Strange sights were seen of dragons, lions, and other ferocious beasts fighting in the air. In the west of Kent it rained wheat, and soon after great drops of blood. On November 15, 530 AD, Halley's Comet swung around the sun again. In 536 AD, Zechariah of middling Greece said, A great and terrible comet appeared in the sky at evening time for 100 days. In 539 AD, the arch-portent, a comet, appeared and was visible for over 40 days. At first the tail was as long as a tall man, but later grew much larger, the swordfish some called it, as its head came to a sharp point, while others called it the bearded star. Around 540 AD, the monk Gildas recorded, the island of Britain was on fire from sea to sea, until it had burned almost the whole surface of the island, and was licking the western ocean with its fierce red tongue. This would support the theory that Britain was ravaged, and in part was rendered uninhabitable by a comet. In 541 AD, a comet was seen from Gaul in Europe, so vast that the whole sky seemed on fire. In the same year there dropped real blood from the clouds. In 542 AD, according to Holinshed in Scotland, the sun appeared about noondays, all wholly of a bloody color. The element appeared in full of bright stars to every man's sight continually for the space of 2 days together. Let's go back and review the third and fourth trumpets. Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 to 12. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. Would you agree that 536 AD was the worst time ever to be alive? Were the fearful sights and great signs from heaven in reference to Halley's Comet in 530 AD and other cosmic activity? Did the cosmic activity and volcanic eruptions trigger the dark days to follow? Is this what John saw in his vision on the island of Patmos? Could this be the meaning of the third and fourth trumpet in the book of Revelation? The dark days would not last forever, but out of that darkness something evil would arise. Thank you for attending today's Bible study, The Darkness. Stay tuned for part 6, The Locusts, in our series Back to the Island of Patmos. God bless.